Hey everybody, welcome to the Security Champions podcast. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Michael Birch. I'm the Director of Application Security here at Security Journey, as well as I am a developer that is passionate about security. I have a non-traditional technical background. I do have a military background where I spent time as an Army Green Beret and Army Ranger. I left the military to pursue my passion in technology, and I have dived down starting as a developer and moved my way into security, and now I've got to the best place ever, right? I get to work in application security, the best of both worlds. We are doing the Security Champions podcast because there's always a need to break down the barriers between teams of security and teams of development. And in my mind, it's one large team and we need to learn to work together. One of the best ways to do this is through Security Champion programs. So we're going to invite guests on. We're going to talk about security-related topics that we think are good for Security Champions to know, how to build the programs, and basically, Jace, anything security we really want to talk about. So for my first guest, I could think of no one better than my mentor and good friend, Chris Romeo. So a little tidbit about Chris Romeo. He's the CEO and founder of Security Journey, and now he's moved on to his new passion at Kerr Ventures, where he's doing a lot of speaking events. He's came up with a framework, the Security Champions framework, as well as a bunch of other ventures that I'll let him dive in and tell you about. So Chris, application security, where'd you get started and what's kind of led you to where you are today?
Sure. I mean, I'm best known for hiring Michael Birch at Security Journey. That's on one of the top things on my bullet list for real. So as you said, I started Security Journey, kind of went all the way through that path, and then ultimately we reached an exit back in May of last year. And since then, as you mentioned, I've been kind of just kicking around, doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of consulting, some advising, and some investing and whatnot. But, the question was, how did I get into application security? And well, that probably goes back to, the years that started with 19. Back in my first entry into security is kind of, I think of that as my entry into AppSec, because I think I've always been an AppSec, even before we called it that. And I'll kind of explain as I tell you a little bit of my story as to why I think that is. But I got into security on accident. So I'm sitting in a job fair. This is back in the years 1997. We're in Washington, D.C. They used to have these giant job fairs where defense contractors would literally, you would stand in a line, they would interview you, and they would say, go stand in that line with HR, and HR would write you an offer letter, you would sign it, and the next day you'd be at work. Like it was a crazy time in the world of everything, of work. And so I'm sitting in this line for a giant defense contractor. There's about 200 people in front of me in this line, and I look over to the side, and there's a guy sitting in this room typing on his laptop, and nobody's talking to him. But he's got a logo on the door. And I'm like, okay, you know what? This thing will be here. Like this line, I can get in the back of this line after. I'm going to go see what this guy's doing. So I went in and I said, hey, you know what? My name's Chris. What are you doing? And he's like, oh, well, we have a security consulting company. Now, granted, this is 1997. Like nobody knew what that was. And it was a government security consulting company. And he said, hey, we happen to be looking for a sysadmin. I said, oh, that's exactly the skill set that I have right now. And so I went through a number of interviews, and he didn't hire me on the spot. I had to go to their offices in the coming weeks. But they ultimately hired me, and they said, you're going to be a sysadmin for about a year, and then we're going to make you, over time, we're going to turn you into a security engineer. I said, oh, great. Don't really know what that is, but that sounds awesome. Hopefully someone will explain to me what a security engineer is and what a security engineer does. But I was so lucky to be in that company because that company was filled with people who were really famous and had done big things in the world of the United States government's kind of security. I mean, we had the chief scientist, the guy who had retired as the chief scientist from NSA, was on staff there. I didn't. Now when I'm looking back, I'm like, I asked that guy so many dumb questions. Why did he even answer? But he would always, you could go to his office and say, Marv Schaefer's his name, say, hey, Marv, can you explain this to me? And he'd get to his whiteboard, he'd draw some pictures, he'd say, okay, this is how this thing works. It goes like this. I look back now and I'm like, I was talking to one of the most brilliant minds in security at the time, and I had no idea what was happening. So that also gives me a lot of passion to mentor other people in our industry and anybody who reaches out to me, because I literally stood on the backs of giants. I didn't even know it at the time. But I say that I've been an AppSec all the way back into those days because I learned fundamental things. I learned how to threat model back in those days. It was understanding what the system does, understanding how to determine the risk levels and what are the threats and what are the potential vulnerabilities and what are mitigations. These are all things that we were doing. We just weren't calling it threat modeling. And so, if we flash forward a little bit, after I worked at Arca Systems for a number of years, and then I went on to Exodus Communications, who acquired Arca, and I don't have time for that story today, but it was a web hosting company. We had 3 out of every 4 clicks on the internet for about 2 years. So we had everybody was a customer of ours. You could name a company from that era and they were in our data centers. And so lots of security hijinks ensued, from DDoS attacks to just people compromising machines. And so I got to investigate and consult with some really high stakes kind of companies that were trying to figure out the internet. And then from there, I was very much blessed in that I had an opportunity to go into Cisco Systems, where I spent 11 years. And I think that's really where I grew up in my security career, because I got a chance to deploy big programs, but also lead security conferences around the world and lead the training program that led ultimately to the founding of Security Journey. And so coming out of Cisco, Security Journey started as a result of the training program that I had built at Cisco, left all the stuff behind, but then started Security Journey to bring those same principles to the rest of the industry. And that was 7 years of my time at Security Journey from the start until we reached the exit just last May. And so right now I'm in that phase of kicking around and trying to figure out what's next.
I will like to say that it was a great experience, even from my perspective, to watch the part that I got to see, because we joined together. It was day one and the first time you were in a real office, right? There was 5, 6 of us in that office putting together the desks and putting computers on tables, right?
Yes, everybody should do that their first day of work. Like, you walked in the door and we're like, "Hey, Mike, nice to meet you. Here's a wrench and a screwdriver. If you could assemble your desk, you'll have someplace to sit." So it was a good team building exercise.
It was a great team building. Like, before you ever have to work with anybody, like, hand someone a screwdriver and say, "Okay, we got to mount this on a wall." Then you see, like, okay, can we work together or not, right? That's when you really get into it.
We all figured it out too as we were going there. So yeah, that was a special time right in the midst of the global pandemic, when everyone else was going home, going to their home offices. We were like, let's think differently. Let's kind of bring everybody into an office.
Yeah, and you know what? It was a great experience and great ride to kind of watch that and get us to where we are now. One of the things I actually like to throw out, you kind of throw out threat modeling, and this is my own little sales pitch for me and you coming up in the next few months. RSA's coming up, right? So we're going to be doing a meeting together and doing a little bit of a threat modeling workshop at RSA. You want to tell me a little bit more about kind of what we're doing there and kind of get a preview?
Yeah, I mean, the title of the workshop is Threat Modeling Red versus Blue. And so, you and I did that workshop last year, where we had 2 sessions of threat modeling, kind of a hands-on workshop where we went through and taught people about threat modeling and then let them do some exercises. Well, this year we're raising the game in that it's red versus blue. So we're going to have a series of different teams spread around the room that are part of this workshop. There's going to be 2 different designs. Each team's going to get a design. They're going to have to come up with the threats around it. And then they're going to switch with another team who had the other design, and then they're going to have to create mitigations. And we're going to be scoring it all the way through, so there'll be head-to-head winners, and there'll be an overall winner in the room. But you can basically think about it like a threat modeling battle royale. That's if I had to summarize it in a couple of words. Now, people will be nice, and there won't be anything flying around the room, but other than brain power, as people try to discover the best threats, the best possible mitigations, and earn the most points towards being the ultimate threat modeling champion of the workshop.
One of the things I always enjoy when we do these type of workshops is the interesting ideas and stuff that people come up with. I can't wait to see what happens this year when we're actually doing a little bit of red team versus blue team, and I'm hoping for all sorts of crazy, new, fun, exciting ways to exploit and defend.
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty exciting. It's going to be a new approach that we're trying something brand new, but it's letting individuals participate on the red team side and the blue team side. So often, and I know people call that purple teaming, but that's effectively what we're doing here, is we're giving you the ability to play on both sides of the equation with a different problem and get scored on it, and ultimately you can win the entire room. Yeah,
I can't wait. I'm really excited to see kind of what comes from that. Now, we are, as part of the Security Champion podcast and into the name, I got to ask, so your experience and kind of what you've seen in Security Champion programs up until this kind of point, kind of like tell me a little bit more about what your view of this is.
Yeah, I mean, just by way of a little bit of history so that folks can understand where I'm coming from. For me, Security Champions is not a theoretical exercise. And so I talked about my 11-year time at Cisco. In kind of the second half of my time at Cisco, I was responsible for Cisco's Security Advocate program, which is effectively Security Champions. And the program had gone through a number of starts and stops like a lot of these programs do. But when I picked it up, there were about 20 people. I will call it a ragtag group of champions because these were the really security passionate people because they were still hanging around even when the thing had kind of fallen apart. And so I took that and started investing in a number of things we're going to talk about as far as, things you can do to make champions programs excellent. We'll get into a lot more detail about that. But I started doing those things, and I even went out to San Jose, which at the time and still is kind of Cisco's corporate headquarters, lots of buildings. And I went cube by cube. I had a list of people I wanted to try to get as champions, and I literally went cube by cube and knocked on people's cube walls and said, "Hi, my name's Chris. I have a strange question for you. Do you want to be a security champion?" And I managed to get a number of people to join up with that 20-person ragtag group, and we started doing monthly meetings and, kind of a whole security conference series around the world and came out of this. But all of that to say, I've done security, I've been a leader of a security champions program. And so what I share comes from experience and stories and things that have been successful. And I've also had the opportunity to talk to a lot of other people, consult on a lot of other security champions programs that different friends in AppSec are running, or I've been invited to come in and take a look at what they're doing and just give some suggestions. And so, all of that to say, I feel like I've felt the pain of trying to run one of these things. And that's why I love to talk about them and share these experiences, because everybody's trying to do the same thing, have the same goal. We want to unify a community of collaboration amongst developers who have some amount of spark in security. And we want to pour into them and educate them and coach them and mentor them and then send them out to bring that passion to the rest of the organization. And so that's really kind of my high-level take on champions.
One of the things I've noticed about this year, too, I'm calling 2023 like the year of security champions, because I feel like I've seen across the board that this is the year that people are starting to realize and release a lot of good information and documentation and guidelines. I'm pretty sure I just saw the other day that OWASP was coming with a security champions guide, right?
Yep.
To add on to everything else. So this is like this is the year. This is the year to embrace security champions and really bring them in to elevate that level of security culture, right?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned this. So the OWASP project is called the Security Champion Manifesto. And it was released a week or two ago from when we were recording this in the middle of March, and so it's out there. It's live on OWASP's site for people to look at. You mentioned there are some other things. There is a Security Champions Playbook, which is another OWASP project. I don't know if OWASP is going to blend all these things together into a single project. I think right now there's a couple separate entities. There's also my friend Dustin Lair did the Security Champion Success Guide, which is another document that he took all of he did similar to me that I did with the framework that we're going to talk about, except I chose to kind of put my output into a maturity model that had various levels. He took a different approach and said, I'm just going to write about all of my experiences and all of the things that I've learned. And so, I mean, I reference the Security Champion Program Success Guide right in the framework that I created. It's at the bottom in the references. Go check this out, because Dustin's a brilliant guy, and he has a lot of experience, similar background to me. He's done champions programs inside of companies, and so it's not with him. It's not theoretical either. It's bringing this stuff out into the industry.
Well, I feel like we're at the point, we're ready to get ready and start talking about the framework and everything you have to bring. But before we jump into the segment where we're going to deep dive into the Security Champions framework, we are going to take a quick break, going to do a short commercial from our sponsor here at Security Journey and let you know about our product.
None of the top 50 university programs teach secure coding in their curriculum. At Security Journey, we help enterprises reduce vulnerabilities through application security education for developers and everyone in the SDLC. With almost 700 up-to-date lessons created by industry-leading security experts and a programmatic approach that creates security champions, our programs have increased AppSec knowledge by as much as 85%. Visit securityjourney.com to try our training today.
All right, well, thank you for taking that short break, and welcome back to the Security Champions podcast. Here where I'm talking with Chris Romeo, and we're going to be diving into the Security Champions framework. Now, Chris, you wrote the Security Champions framework. Kind of give me an overview of what it is and kind of the problem we're trying to solve here.
Yeah, certainly. So when I think about the framework, kind of the high-level way that I describe this to people, Security Champion framework provides both a measuring stick and a roadmap generator for champion programs. And so what I've done, and I've gotten some input from some of my other friends in the industry, is capture all of the best practices that I'm aware of in the world of security champions and drop them into a maturity model. And so this is a measuring stick in that you can use this as a tool to assess your existing champions program and see, according to the way I think of the different maturity levels, where you land in a number of different categories. But you can also use it as a roadmap generator to say, I want to improve my program. So after I assess, how do I go from a level 2 in a particular area to a level 3? And so this is all based on the OWASP SAM was kind of our influence, which is, the software assurance maturity model. Great project from OWASP to kind of assess the entire of an application security program, but I thought their model was really powerful of using these different levels of maturity and giving you some clues as to how you can move from one to the next. And so from a high level perspective, it's about giving you a tool to assess where your program is today, but also a roadmap generator so that you can aim for a better future where you are improving in particular areas of running and executing the program.
So that's an interesting kind of concept to me, because I've always kind of seen the approach with security champions is like a binary. Are we doing it or not? And that's a lot of the times the way the companies kind of evaluate themselves. You're taking this model of like, okay, so what? Even if you're doing it, maybe you're just at a level 1. How do we improve that program? How do we get to those next levels? Yep. Can you kind of give me more like some more details about how the framework's kind of put together?
Yeah, so it's broken right now into 5 different areas, and then there are sub areas within each of these. And so the document itself is available on GitHub, and you can add a note, add a link to it in the show notes, because it's Creative Commons 4.0. Like this is available for the community. I released it in such a way so that anybody can do whatever they want with it, and which also means people can give me feedback. And I will add that feedback. I've already gotten reviews from Izar Tarandosh and Brooke Schoenfeld, 2 people who are pretty well known in the AppSec space and have a lot of opinions about champions. They gave feedback, and I was able to address that. So this project is totally open for feedback from anybody that wants to help improve it or ask questions or anything else about it. But when we think about the different ways that it's broken down, so the 5 distinct areas that the framework contains today. It starts with planning. So these are your activities that you need to scope the program and build a strategy around what you're going to try to achieve. And then the second area is what we call people. And so this includes recruiting. How are you signing up new champions? Retaining. How are you keeping, or retention? How are you keeping those champions engaged and excited about the program so they don't all quit? Capturing commitment. How are you capturing people's interest and signing them up? And then ultimately onboarding new champions. What processes have you laid out to ensure that a champion, when they join the program, they don't feel like they're lost. They feel like they have a path towards understanding what's expected of them and being a full-fledged champion. Third area is marketing. The funny story for me about marketing is that, I was in the phase of my Cisco career where I was running the conferences and things around the world. And one of my good friends from my Cisco days, Tony Vargas, tells me, he's like, we're actually in sales and marketing. And I'm like, dude, no way, man. Don't even stop that. We're not in sales and marketing. We're security engineers. This is what we do. He's like, well, think about what we do. What do we do? we travel around and we tell people about security and we get them excited about it and get them to commit to do it. I'm like, oh, okay, crap, I'm in sales and marketing. But that's okay. That's a good thing. So we have a section on marketing in the framework here where we talk about how, what have you done to brand the program, to communicate with all the stakeholders, various levels of what you can do. The fourth area is what we call execution. So these are your program pillars, your coaching, your education. Education is a big part of your Champions program. I'm a firm believer that the education program that you do, like what Security Journey offers, has to be very cohesive with the Champions program. They cannot be two separate entities because the Champions are the ones who are going to be pushing and learning the most out of the education platform and also helping to bring other folks in. Final part of execution is globalization, one of the forgotten champion disciplines. Most companies don't all exist in one geographical region. You have, like at Cisco, I had people in India, I had people in China, I had people in Europe, I had everywhere. Like every time zone I had people. And so I had to do some things to ensure that we were able to serve those different populations. As we got to a certain size, there were other things we could do to serve them well. And then the final area is really measurement. So metrics for demonstrating value that you generate in the program. So we got to be able to report back out to our leadership so that they can see the value of the things that we're doing from a Champions perspective, because we're going to need some money. This isn't something we can do it for free, but we're not going to be super successful if we have a zero budget. We need some money to toss into this program to make some of the things move. How do we get that budget approved? Well, we have to have metrics that show how effective we're being and the benefits of the program. So from a high level perspective, it's planning, people, marketing, execution, and measurement.
So when we're talking about these frameworks, there's a lot more in depth than I think I've ever looked at Security Champions program. One of the biggest questions I get when people are starting these programs, and maybe not in the farther levels of maturity, is how do we get kicked off? How do we get started? Does the framework kind of give some guidance into that frame of like, how do I even get to that level one framework? Or does it really give you the measurement tool to see where you're at and then maybe some tools to get to the next level?
So kind of there's in the root of the Security Champion framework GitHub repo, there is a readme.md where I've put a bunch of thoughts about programs in general, things like how do you name it? Why do you need champions? What is a successful champion? What's the value for the champion? The return on champions program for the company? And then Brooke Schoenfeld provided some feedback, which I think is good for people to answer your question about when you're starting. He shared some feedback that I took and just pasted directly into this model of different champion program models. So one of those things that you have to decide up front, it's not really a maturity thing, so we didn't put it as a direct piece of the maturity model, because how you solve the problem is not, I'm not going to say like one approach is more mature than another, because I don't know if, because like Brooke in his input here, he talks about really three different models. You have a central team and security referees. So that's kind of like where the central security team and then the champions are referees out in the market or in the business units that are judging various activities and telling people what they can do. You have a central team and then security engineer champions, where the champions are handling the basic security tasks and then the complex functions happen in the central team. And then his third one, you have fully empowered security satellite, where where security people are spread throughout development. So where you have reached this stage where the security team has gone deeper into all the product teams and there are security representation everywhere. So there is a lot of guidance in this document in that README about getting started. If you're coming in completely cold and you're like, what is a security champion? What are some of the models that I could use to try to do it? Before you're even ready to talk maturity, there's some guidance here in the framework to help you understand.
So the nice part I'm hearing about this framework then is it's kind of agnostic on the approach you take. It's more saying, hey, are you accomplishing the task that you need to based on the maturity you think you're at?
Yeah. We didn't want to prescribe a scenario for that you had to do champions exactly the way that I think you should do it, or Brooke thinks, or Izar, or anybody. Like we want the framework to apply to multiple models of how you approach this. And it's more about the most, what I think of as the kind of the non-negotiable areas, things like retention of people. I don't care how you do champions, retention is a crucial area, because if not, it's just like customer retention. Like if you don't take care of the customer during their first year of using your service, then they don't renew. Well, same thing for champions. If you don't deliberately take care of them well and ensure that they're acknowledged and their management knows what the good things they're doing and they're feeling like, oh, I'm getting a lot out of this, I don't want to quit. That applies to, I don't care what model you're using for champions. I will argue that retention is important, an important part of it. Because if not, you're turning over your champion group every year and you're not getting anywhere. I don't care what you say. You're not getting anywhere with it.
Yeah, I think that's important from a business standpoint in general. If you're going to ask somebody to do additional tasks, you have to recognize that that extra effort, one way or another. It doesn't matter if it's monetary, it doesn't matter if it's recognition, it doesn't matter if it's chance for promotion. But somehow, if you're going to ask for effort, you need to provide them with some sort of obviously something, right?
And you've captured what I think is one of the most unknown and unrecognized concepts within the world of security champions. And I've been talking about this for about 2 years now. And here it is. It's actually pretty simple. The biggest mistake that most people make when it comes to champions is they make it all about the company. It's what can the champions do for us as a company? And so what I do now is I flip it all the way back around and say, what can the Champions program do to enrich the lives of the developers, the jobs of the developers, the future career aspirations of the developers? And when I put them first and practice, kind of putting them in front of any of the other goals, I end up with a Champions program where nobody wants to leave because they're getting value. And then when they feel appreciated, then I ask them to go do something to improve security inside of their particular product. And of course they're going to do it. They've bought into it. But it's because we value them and we provide something to them that they say, oh, this, I don't want to be, don't kick me out of this. I want to be here. Like I want to do more for security because they see the value. And so that's what folks really got to get their heads wrapped around early in the champion process, is saying, this isn't about the company. Yes, the company is going to get some benefits from this, but if you make it about the company, then it's just another program and the developers can't wait to get out of it.
You've completely flipped that kind of paradigm where it's like the idea it's just another program, right? If I just shove security training in front of you and say, you have to do this, check block, move on, right? Nobody's going to want to do it well. Nobody's going to be enthusiastic about it. But with this whole thing, you've changed the security champions from an asset and you've made them the customer, right? In our mindset, as us running those programs, our security champions are our customers. How can we make our customers happy so they keep returning and using our product? They keep being security champions.
Yeah, and you'll see a bunch of this sprinkled into the framework as well. Like for example, at Cisco, one of the things I did is I went to ISC Squared and I said, I want to pay for a CSS LP class. I want to pay for, and I want to just bring a bunch of people. So we did a 6-week instructor-led over WebEx. So it was ISC Squared, like one of their top CSS LP instructors, did a 6-week course. I think we did 3-hour sessions or 4-hour sessions. I don't remember what it was. But as my champions program, we just wrote the check. And so I was able to invite 20 out. Now I brought the top people, that the ones that were really getting stuff done and were really just killing it. Those are the people that I invited, and all the other 100 champions were like, because we talked about it. I'm like, I'm not going to hide this. I'm like, we've chosen these people because they've gone above and beyond helping us to move security forward. And so we're bringing them into this class, and we paid for the exam too. So that's a $600. The class was probably worth $2,000 a person, and the exam was $600. So they didn't have to. Yeah, could they have gotten it approved by their manager? Yeah, if they would have really gone. But all we did is we wrote the check and we said, come on in, take part in this, and here's how you take the exam when you're done. Welcome to being a CSS LP, because that's one of the value props we give to you as champions. It's amazing when you flip it around on them. I mean, another thing I did, we built a master's degree in cybersecurity through San Jose State, and it was specifically aimed at our security champions. The champions population had grown. Like when I started, and I said there was that 20 ragtag champions, it was about 500 by the time I left Cisco. So it had exploded. So we had multiple cohorts of Cisco people. San Jose State would send professors to Cisco's campus, and they would teach master's level cybersecurity courses based on a curriculum that I designed. And then they would go through it for 2 years. Cisco paid the whole. I got Cisco's management to pay the whole thing. There was no reimbursement. I said, can we just write a check for the first semester? And then after that, everything will be done via tuition reimbursement. So the champion would never have to take $1 out of their pocket to make it happen. Figured out how to do that. We had, lots of people that graduated from that program and went on to become security roles in different companies. And so but once again, if that wasn't about me, I didn't do that. Like it wasn't like we did that master's program because it helped the company. It provided a value to the champions, and it caused more people to go, wait, you get to be in a master's program here? Well, when you get to you had to be at the elite levels of champions that were getting invited into the program. But people from the outside are looking in going, holy cow, you're getting special training. You're getting, no money out of pocket for master's degrees. You're getting to be part of this network. And it was just a huge value proposition for the champion themselves. The company got a lot of value out of it, don't get me wrong. But when we thought champion first, that really created an environment that people were knocking down the doors. In the latter days of my time at Cisco, people were knocking down the doors trying to get in. They're like, oh, how do I get in? And then we were able to do cool things like set basic requirements. Oh, so you want to be a champion? Here's what you got to do first. You have to go through a certain level of the education program before you can even be considered to be a champion. You have to get your manager to approve a certain amount of time that you're going to put. So we could get really selective then, because we had matured the program in such a way that everybody wanted in. I wasn't going around twisting arms anymore. It was people knocking down the door saying, hey, let me in. I want to be a champion now, which that was a pretty fun time in the program.
I mean, I feel like that's the ultimate goal. If you're doing this right, you should have people that want in, and you should be pushing back, saying, hey, we can only do so many right now in the support. Yeah. You got to be at the top tier. One of the things that I find so interesting is the way you were able to leverage the education benefits in a way that benefited not only the employee, which is the true incentive they have for long-term, like, hey, this is going to impact me for the rest of my life, whether it's a cert, whether it's a master's program, but you're also providing them education just to be better at doing their job when they're working with you, right?
Yep.
So you're investing in somebody that's going to give a return, right? Their expertise is going to be used at the company, but it's also good for them for the rest of their life, right? So finding those really unique scenarios where you can add value to the company and the individual is so important, I think. And I think it's way better than like, okay, well, you get a Saturday off next month, right? Like that's okay. There's a good, when you're restricted maybe on what you can offer as a reward for being part of the program. But the better, more high programs, I feel you can do way better value for the learner and yourself if you do it correctly.
Yeah, and I didn't have access to those things on day one, right? That was multiple years of successfully growing the program to a point where I could even go to the executive VP at the time and say, yeah, can you just pay for this for us? Like I didn't do, that didn't happen in month one. That happened in year 4 of a lot of grinding that happened in year 1 and 2 to get the program back on track and get people back engaged. And so I don't want people to hear this and go, oh, well, my company, I could never do that. Like with success breeds success. And so having some success in the program allowed us to gain more success by getting EVPs to approve spending what in their budget was actually a tiny amount of money in the grand scheme of their budget to enable us to have that level of program. But you can get started, and that's why I laid out this model, the roadmap and everything, the Champions Framework the way I did. There's some level 1 things you can do that can help you build towards those higher level things in the future. You got to get level 1 fixed first or resolved before you can start thinking about the bigger pieces.
I think one of the other things in this is, and a common theme I'm seeing, this is a patient game. Like you don't just start a security champion program day 1, and then all of a sudden my vulnerabilities in my code are cut in half, and all of a sudden great return on investment right off the bat. Like, it takes time to build these programs to really see those ROIs in that like culture change that we're hoping to kind of enforce.
Yeah, I mean, this is turning the battleship. That's what security culture, let's call it the cruise ship. This is turning the cruise ship. Like, if you ever been on a cruise ship, they don't make a quick turn and go left. They slowly begin the turn, and it takes them half an hour to go 90 degrees difference. From going straight to going left, it takes an hour to make that turn. They can't just turn the wheel quickly. Same thing with champions programs and security culture in general. Like, you can't just expect like, oh, well, I'll just do this and 3 months later, everything will be great. No, everything in 3 months will be just about the same as it is now. It takes years of time going in this to really put this together and make things happen. And so just know you're in for the long haul. Like, whether it's your education program, your champions program, these are, security culture change takes time. And you will see good things happen along the way, but don't expect in 3 months like, well, we have this whole security thing figured out. Nope, it's not going to happen. Sorry.
Now, leading on the kind of conversation we have here of like a long program, it takes time to build up. Just asking from your personal experience, like, what's some advice you can give out to people that are trying to adopt this framework and starting to kind of roll out their programs and increase that maturity? Kind of highlight areas you think they should really call out.
I mean, it's really comes down to starting simple and working your way up from there. I mean, everything, the way that I kind of laid these things out is, let's take coaching, for example. Coaching is something that I think is a very people just aren't doing it today. People haven't embraced this idea of security coaches. And so when I think about, the various maturity levels under coaching, for example, maturity level 0, which is true for all of the framework. When it's a level 0, it means you're just not doing the thing. Maturity level 1 is volunteer coaches. You have champions who are saying, hey, I raised my hand. I can help coach people. Maturity level 2, you have people on staff that are dropping in different areas and doing coaching. Maturity level 3, you have dedicated coaches assigned to particular jobs or particular teams where they're full-time coaching in regards to security. You look at coaching and say, well, where, for somebody that's starting out fresh, where do I go from here? It starts with just having some level of volunteer coach, for example. And from there, I have to have, a deeper understanding of what the particular business is doing and whatnot. From a program perspective, the security champions, the kind of the classic approach is to go with the monthly training session. That's one of the first pillars that you have to set up and get rolling. And so that's one of the things that people need to figure out. And that's why under the execution, maturity level 1 for program is monthly training. Having that monthly training that happens on a consistent time and date, doesn't get canceled, and you're bringing champions in to be a part of that. You're reaching out to industry folks to help you along that process. Like, that's one of the first pieces that is kind of the main things that comes together there. When I think about, recruitment, getting people, that's something that you're going to be thinking about very early in the process as well. How are we going to get that initial set of champions brought in? Underneath people, you also have commitment, which is, how are we going to get them to commit? And so one of the things that we did with the maturity model, this was some feedback I got from, I think it was, might have been Izar, might have been Brooke, using a time metric. So if you look in the framework at the people and then the commitment level, maturity level 1, people are committing to 1 hour a week on their champion activities. That's a good place to start. Maturity level 2, 2 to 4 hours. Maturity level 3, they're putting a full 8 hours of commitment in per week. They're putting 1 day out of their 5-day schedule is being dedicated to their security champion activities. But with all of the things in the framework, level 1 is where you're going to start. And that's how we set it up the way we did on purpose, so that if you're somebody new and you're like, okay, where do I begin? Read the readme.md and then go through and look at the level 1s and see, pick 3 of those level 1s and say, this is where I'm starting. Also have the other level 1s in your view, but you may look at your program and go, I don't really need coaches off the start. Okay, great. That's fine. It's your program. This this framework is not 100% prescriptive, like you have to do it my way or it's not right. It's about giving you ideas and then giving you kind of a pathway to be able to know how to get from 0 to, level 3 on various pieces of the champion story.
So you kind of actually preluded me to my next question, because I was going to be asking about the fact that level 1, and we're looking at it. If as a custom program, I see there's like 8 things I'm supposed to do. I don't know the exact number. I'm not looking at the moment. But before I start pursuing those level 2, do you think it's important to cover all those level 1 bases, or just start pulling on the strings that are just working for you?
I mean, I think it's up to the individual program person to know. You have to know your culture. You have to know your company, your organization, wherever you're doing this. Some of these things are probably not possible inside of some companies. I'm okay with that. This is not the goal of the Security Champion framework. Is not to say you have 100% compliance. This is not a compliance document. This is about ideas. And so if somebody goes and they take one thing from the level 1 and they're like, the other 2 things are like, I don't really think that's important for me here. Okay. This is my thought process on what I've seen be successful and what others that I know have seen be successful. It doesn't mean that's the only way to do something. And so this is about giving you ideas and not as much about saying that, hey, I complied with. I don't want anybody to say my champions program is level 2 compliant. Like if I hear that, I'll probably delete the repo from GitHub.
So that's something I think that's a big takeaway on this. Sounds like a great tool that we can go in, check out to see where we are, and come up with ideas on where we can improve or gaps we can fill, right?
Yep.
It's kind of a holistic framework to adapt to our environment. It's not the only truth that you must follow every step of in every way.
Yep, that's 100% true. That is a good way to summarize how I see it as the person who is the primary author of most of this document. It is not the definition of truth. There are other things that you can apply, other things that aren't in here. Now, if you think of them, please open a PR and help us make the framework better. If you do something and you're like, oh, they don't have that in here, open a PR. We will commit it and we will add it so that we can all help other people grow their programs in the future.
Okay, well, before we wrap up on the Security Champions framework, is there any other tidbits of information that I maybe didn't ask you about, or something you just want to tell about the framework and the program you're working on?
No, I think we dove pretty deep into it, and I think folks will have a good understanding for what the framework is. Why did we create it? What's it good for? How can it help them? I guess my kind of call to action to the audience would be, go take a look at it. Go assess your program against it. If you think that we missed some things, great, tell us. We'll add them in. And also give us feedback. If you used it and it was valuable, let us know as well. We'd love to know that it's providing some value to the industry across the board. But the key with something like this is you just got to go apply it. We can only talk about it for so long. Then you have to go do some work with it and see what type of value it adds for you.
Well, that's a great ending in crisp fashion, because I love it, and you say it all the time. We can only talk about so long. Let's do some action. Like a catchphrase for you would be perfect right there. So, hey, I thank you for spending some time jumping on the Security Champions podcast, sharing the Security Champions framework with us. It's always a great time to jump on and chat with you and talk about things security.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Now, for everybody else, thank you for coming out and listening to Security Champions podcast. We will have another episode coming up soon. I hope you come and join us as we dive into more security-related topics. Have a good evening, and always remember, security is a journey, not a destination.